Okay, so as I did mention, our next session is speaking to some of those employers who have created family-friendly workplaces and who have demonstrated really clear examples that we have seen and we've reported on Women's Agenda regarding what they're doing to support parents and to support families in general, regardless of what those caring responsibilities are. They've also got some great examples of what they did during COVID, which I think is particularly interesting to look at. So I will bring both of those employers in. So first up, I've got Nirelle Tolstoshev, who is the Managing Director of Organon ANZ, which is the largest biopharmaceutical company dedicated to women's health and has only actually was launched earlier this year. And I've also got Alicia Purtell, who is the People and Culture Director at Lion. And Alicia has held various roles at Lion, including Talent Director, Strategy and Insights Director, and People and Culture Director for Lion Australia. Prior to joining Lion, Alicia was with Zurich and Westpac and Citibank. So thank you both for joining me.
Great to be here, Angela.
So I'm not sure if you would have had been able to capture much of that previous session, but you did see that we're talking about a lot of these bigger issues regarding what parents need and what parents need from a policy level, but also from an employer level as well. I've gotten to know your organisations in different ways this year, which has been great. Alicia, I did an interview with your CEO recently, who is definitely somebody I would say has had vision and has led on some pretty impressive changes there. And Nirelle, we love doing the podcast with you around women's health, which obviously we're covering a lot of in this series here. So that's been fantastic too. I know that you're also, I see your LinkedIn updates and things, and I can see some of the great examples and how you're promoting flexible work within your organisations and certain initiatives that you've achieved during the pandemic period. So I might even start there to ask that question of both of you, just to share some of those those good examples of things that you've seen have actually made a difference when it comes to the health and well-being of people when it, who have families and have lives outside of work, which is really everyone, but that those initiatives that do support our lives outside of work. Alicia, maybe starting with you.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing is you've got to tackle these initiatives in a way that's not just painting the sort of surface. You've got to really go deeper. And one of the things that we did is we tried to take a change to the shared care that removed all the obstacles of why you wouldn't find males potentially taking that primary role. What was stopping them? Why were they only taking a few weeks? And so what that really got to for us was trying to open up the range of when they could take it. So saying rather than in 1 year, it's 2 years. And then the real game changer has to say, take it any way you like. So that could be in blocks. It could be every week a day. It could be doing that in a fixed period of time that really works for your family. And what that has meant is that families have started talking together in a shared way about what they need. I heard a great story the other day from one of my team who said they can't get care for their child for more than 3 days. So they need a fourth day, and he will be that person doing the fourth day. And it just changes lives, and it removes those impediments that says, well, the company is giving me shared care, but they're saying only this way, as opposed to I decide and I have choice. And that's really the key insight, is if you're going to make things sustainable when you go to wellbeing or when you go to employee care, there has to be a lot of choice in it or it doesn't stick.
Nirelle, to you now.
Yeah, thanks. And perhaps I'll talk about a really tangible example during the pandemic, which none of us were prepared for. Families weren't prepared, companies weren't prepared. And we noticed pretty early on in this year's lockdown, and it coincided with us launching a brand new company. We just floated on the New York Stock Exchange in the first week of June, a couple of weeks into our new company, and suddenly we were in lockdown. And we paused as a leadership team, and we were really thoughtful about our people. And we've developed what we term a people-first culture. We didn't make up those words, but that terminology is embedded through the company. And one of the initiatives that really helped with that, we called it the gift of time. And it was during the pandemic early on when we noticed that families were struggling. And if you just apply a thoughtful and practical lens to what's going on in households with families, parents trying to work, homeschooling, caring for younger children, different generations, caring responsibilities, we knew practically that it was just impossible for anyone to achieve an 8-hour day without feeling guilty or neglecting other responsibilities. And we know that people want to feel their best selves both at home and at work. And so acknowledging that companies, particularly multinationals, do such great volunteer work, CSR work, we saw as an extension of that to give people back time to help balance the particularly homeschooling needs. And we made that very tangible. We gave people up to 3 hours a day to help their children with meals, homeschooling, all of the things that were going on in households. We all know what it was like. And the goodwill that we got back from the teams was, you know, people were really struck the fact that we did that. And they said, that's great. I'll make up the time at night. I get it. I'll make up. And we said, no, we don't want you to make up the time. We want you to use that time with your family and with your children. And so you're removing the guilt and you can manage that juggle just a little bit better. We also had some wellbeing initiatives during lockdown for people, mindful not everybody has children and homeschooling responsibilities, to get out for a couple of hours a day and work on their own wellbeing. And we didn't think this was such a big deal, but we've learnt that it was quite unique and it did attract a lot of media attention, as you know, Angela. And I just think other companies should get on board. I think this should be the normal way of doing things. When there's extraordinary things going on, we really need to support our people. And I think it's great for business, our teams and the community.
Okay. So a few things that have come up across the sessions today is around the box ticking and token efforts and things that sort of show that you're doing something, but then not really happening at the deeper level. What do you think needs to be done to ensure that efforts towards diversity, inclusion and efforts towards supporting health and wellbeing of staff are really meaningful and really do get taken up and don't kind of sit there as, oh, I can access that, but I won't because actually that won't look great when I go for my next promotion or my next performance review? Alicia, what do you think?
Well, I think you've got to go back to the why you're doing it all. You know, what is it that makes that attractive for the company or for the leaders? And that's a bit of a brave call to ask your leader or to ask a CEO or, you know, a fellow employee. And I think that unless you do that, you're really just not clear on what you're wanting to make a difference around. There's so many things you can focus on in inclusion and diversity. And so the best way to make that authentic and feel genuine is to really ask yourself, what does your organisation connect with? Where do you feel like you can really make a difference? And to really go after that. Try not to do everything, because when you do everything, you don't do it in a sustainable way. You don't see it at the top. You don't see it at the bottom. You really need to achieve change at a whole of system level. And what that means is that you go after things in everything you do. You know, we talk a lot about culture, which is a well-known definition about what's encouraged, what's discouraged, and what you don't tolerate. And if you were trying to hardwire an initiative, take it gender targets, gender diversity, inclusion for difference around gender, you need to think about what are the behaviours you're encouraging, what are the behaviours you're discouraging, and what are you tolerating and not tolerating on that. And that systemic culture change takes a lot of precision. It's not hard, it's just dedication. And I think the question I would have for leaders is try not to do as much and try and think about that change at a whole of system level where everyone can get behind it. You also need good role models. You absolutely can't have this stuff promoted in a way if you aren't walking the talk. You know, if you don't have a CEO or you don't have an executive team that's up for that, then, you know, that's a real challenge. Having said that, we are at a different stage of culture transformation. You know, we know in life, we know in the community that people hold the power. And it's a really good time to rise up if you're individuals, to advocate, to agitate. And I think that there is a huge window and a moment, this awakening that's happening that people can tap into. So, you know, really connected with the previous speakers and the way they talked about find a role model, find an advocate, and use this window, because people are worried. They're worried about their engagement, they're worried about their safety, they're worried about their bottom line, and leverage that moment, but do it in a way that's really choiceful, or you'll end up trying to do too much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Nirelle, what do you think of that question?
Yeah, and perhaps I'll pick up on the role modelling thread. We were really mindful as leaders, launching initiatives such as the gift of time and demonstrating that we were actually using it. And so we use the corporate social media tool Yammer and lots of other channels, and we had photos of leaders and all through all levels of the organisation, pictures of homeschooling, pictures of out on bike rides, walking dogs, showing that we were demonstrating the really those ways of working. And even as recent as a couple of days ago, I was in Melbourne with our Melbourne team, and we had a dinner, and I was chatting with some of the parents in a group, and we got onto this role, and it was hilarious, of homeschooling stories, and there's all the banter that comes with that. And I had my own stories. I have twin boys in year 8, and I seem to be redoing year 8 algebra this year myself. And finally, I think I maybe understand it. And at breakfast the next morning, one of them came up to me and she said, "Oh, I love that conversation last night because you're just like us. You're just one of us." I said, "Yes, I'm a parent. I'm real, and I'm approachable." And I think that role modelling is really important. But just to touch on the validation and the tokenistic nature that can sometimes prevail in companies, I think we need to hold ourselves accountable to measurement. And so internal surveys, we've just had fresh results come back from an engagement survey showing that 94% of our employees deem us favourable on the term of diversity is valued, and we were thrilled with that. That's just, you never get 100 for anything, but 94 is extraordinary. And the family-friendly workplace certification, going through that process, it makes you hold up the mirror. So I would encourage any HR teams, leadership teams, to get on that website, have a look at the criteria, because you have to hold the mirror up around your policies and processes on flexibility. Is it equal? Is it inclusive? Parental leave, similar, family care, family wellness. Are leaders enabled to actually implement the policies, etc.? And importantly, are you measuring your success? And we got that certification a couple of months into our brand new company, which we're really proud of. And we also achieved membership for Pride in Diversity as well. And so I think those tangible internal and external measures, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And where there's gaps, so with the family-friendly certification, we've got some actions to follow up, and we're sweeping our policies at the moment to make sure they're as progressive as possible. But I think that benchmarking is really important.
Yes, absolutely. So Emma and Alicia, I might ask you to take a bit of a personal approach to the next question. So, and it follows on from what Emma Walsh mentioned when we asked their advice to what they would tell women who might want to go and talk to an employer about their own situational flexibility or try and ask for something more to support their well-being. Now, Emma spoke about the need for a sponsor or a mentor, and I think that the idea of a sponsor or a mentor, I hadn't really thought much about this previously, but I think it does have a really strong connection to women's health, not only in, maybe getting more for your well-being or flexibility, whatever you need, but also having someone in your corner if ever you're encountering, say, bullying or sexual harassment or something else going on in your workplace, that you might be able to have that ear to go and talk to. I wondered if both of you might be able to share an example or some way that you've been championing someone who works for you or someone in other industries, and what may have led you to those people, what may have brought them into your orbit, and also, what you learnt from the process as well.
Yeah, look, I think for me, I'm a really big fan of coaching. I think that is really empowering for the individual. Mentoring is about, I tell you what I've done and hope that resonates for you. But coaching is about being all for the coachee. And so I think the best way I do that is where there are people who are on a new path for a role or at a tipping point of their life and career, really setting up a very clear evidence-based coaching engagement with them. And I love it myself because I get to hear more about what's going on in the business and what's happening with them. And there's a lot of structure to it. And it's a real gift, because when you say, well, if we were going to do like 6 coaching sessions and, you know, it's all about you and what you want in 12 months time with your career, the conversations you have, the openness, the dreaming that people begin, you know, it's quite powerful, as opposed to just come along and talk to me and I'll tell you why I'm so great. And I'm not in any way taking away from mentoring, but for me, the unlock is where you are right by that side of that person and you're asking them to think in quite a structured way about what they need, and giving them the opportunity to believe that in themselves. And so, you know, that's probably the way that I do it, because I'm really a big fan of that. And when I think about the people who've made a real difference in my career, they have been my coaches, and we've had a lot of structure to it. And I still use really great coaches now. And, you know, I think it's deliberate, and I think it's really personal, and it's very achievement oriented. So, you know, if you've got a person that's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to navigate all this person, people in my life? How am I going to, that leader, my children, you know, you actually work on the whole person, and it's super rewarding. And for us at Lion, coaching's a bit of our DNA. We believe that it's a skill that you teach the same way that you would learn influencing or, you know, presenting. And so, you know, that's something that I've been really passionate about, as have my previous leaders. And that's probably the way I make a difference for others, is to showing up just for them, but doing that in a way that's quite challenging, but still very clear in terms of their care.
And so, Alicia, so that is in a structured way. Is it typically like executive coaching? Is it happening internally?
Yeah, it's internal. So I guess that's the concept, right? So I personally think an executive coach is excellent, but why do we even have this term executive coach? Like, do you have to be really senior and really executive in order to have a coach? It's really more like a career transition coach. It's a point of development, a shift that's happening for you. And why I think that's really interesting is because you're doing something in a very structured way that allows that person to think about their development, where their, you know, key questions are, what's the sort of shadow side of their leadership. And what really makes a difference is if you outsource that, if you give that to another person to do, you've just given the gift of that, which you can do with your people. You've just missed an engagement moment with them. So for me personally, given my background in coaching and leadership, that's the way I really spend my time with people that I think would be really meaningful. And I think just that championing and mentoring, of course, is super important, but you ask for that personal sort of take, and I really love it as well. It's really a meaningful relationship.
Do you try to, just one more question on that, do you try to get it to every aspect of the organization? Because often we hear about these programs and it's like you have to be identified as a talented individual, and then you see all these other people left out of that and they don't fit the definition of whatever a talented individual is. But do you get it across everyone?
Yeah, so the concept of how you coach and how you do that with a lot of structure and what the mindset and the behaviors are around that, any leader can get at Lion. And the idea is that to be a leader is to be a coach, and to do that in a way that's not just let's focus on a whip and let's just focus on the here and now, but let's step up from this and let's look at the long term and let's consider your development. And so, you know, at Lion, we bring that leadership coaching to the front and center for all. The coaching I just talked about, which I would consider is that sort of transformative coaching, we would, of course, pick people. But the way that happens is because they say, hey, I need some help. And so across our organization, lots of fantastic leaders who I work with, my peers, their teams, this is just a bit of a way of life that we give people that mentoring and guidance, but we don't do it from a place of here I am, follow me, I'm the best. It's what do you need and how do I set a path for you that I can clear the way on, but actually you are the owner of that journey. You are the person that drives those actions, and it's really, really powerful. And if you choose to use coaching externally to deliver that, as I said, it's really meaningful, and I've done that myself, but there's nothing more powerful than people having your back who are in the organization.
Okay, so Nirelle, obviously we went down the path of coaching, and so back to the question, and I know that in your situation, it might not necessarily be coaching, it might be something else, but that idea of any examples that you might share where you've championed individuals, what led you to do that, how you found those people, and what were some of the outcomes?
Yeah, and perhaps I'll start with when I was reflecting as you were asking the question of moments in my career that really challenged my thinking, and it was mostly about those leaders more progressed in their career than me at the time that helped me believe in myself. And I remember who they were. Some of them I remember the moment when they said, you're capable of doing this. And I've never forgotten that. And so I try and pay that forward. And I think all good leaders do that. And I'm sought out by a lot of peers and people throughout the organisation, the industry, and form a company for that. And I think to focus, whether it's coaching, whether it's mentoring, whether it's training, I think to help people believe in themselves, particularly women tend to focus on the skills they don't have, and it's well researched, whereas men focus on the few skills that they might have. And so I think it's helping women, and all potential leaders to believe in themselves. We're building a coaching and mentoring framework at Organon, and we're only a few months in. But one initiative that we've launched that's been really well received is the leadership team pop-up coaching. And what that is anyone across the organisation can work with their leader to then, in a purposeful way, work with one of the directors, one of the leadership team, on a particular area, which might just be, I want to learn about your career trajectory, or it might be on a couple of specific areas. And we call it pop-up coaching because it's typically a couple of sessions because we can't all be mentoring everyone all the time. And we're expanding that because that's only one facet of mentoring, but that's quite unique. And we did that to ensure that the leadership team are connected, that we're approachable, that we can add value back, and that we're not an LT that's sitting, in a big office in a corner and never seen. So that's a couple of reflections on the question.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. Okay, so I want to ask another very quite a challenging question, I guess, for you to define some of these characteristics. But I want to ask you about what does make good leadership, particularly as you have obviously got great experience, not only in your own organisations, but working across other industries and other organisations of different sizes as well. What do you think what are the characteristics? What are the great things that a leader needs to be in order to have these, to be family friendly, to have this workplace, this great workplace that we're trying to talk about right now that will aim to support the health and wellbeing of the staff, which will ultimately give them the best talent as well? What does that look like?
It's interesting because leadership theory is always changing, and you can really fall in love with certain forms of it. And I have, I did lots of authentic leadership programs at Lion, and I'm a disciple of that, and that's all about being true to yourself and others. And then you have to change. You have to say, well, hang on, that's not working anymore. And also my style of leadership isn't working, and that's about growing up and growing with the organisation and with the community. So the leadership that I'm really curious about at the moment, and I'll be frank, it's hard. It's a really hard leadership shift to make, is shared leadership. And that is one of the collective. And it doesn't mean that the leader abdicates their role. It's not like, oh, let's all just sort of be a team and nobody's in charge, because that's also not healthy as well. But it essentially is the role of shared problem solving. It's the co-creation of ideas, but it is also deferring to certain team members who have a better leadership perspective in that space. If I think about people in my team, someone might be the consumer advocate more given their background. Someone might be more of the ethical champion and say, hang on a minute, have we thought about this? You've got deep SMEs who will say, well, I'm going to give you a total different view. So it is really the shared distribution of that leadership role, that thought leadership, that change leadership. It's really powerful at the moment because we don't really know all the answers of this future of work. And everyone's talking about hybrid, and I don't really think that it's a nice term and it makes it sound really simple, but it's not going to work. Ultimately, it's like anywhere work's probably going to be the better solution. Work where you need and the choice behind that. So if you don't have sort of a shared model of leadership, you won't be able to solve those highly adaptive, complex challenges that organizations are facing at the moment. So wherever you land, I think it's got to be something that's more distributed. It can't be hierarchical, and it really needs to be egoless. If you've got an ego and you're running around and you can't just be like, yep, I don't know what I'm doing here, I've got to get some help. You really have to be prepared to pass the baton around. The other thing I would say that it relies on is really heart-centered coaching, right? I talked about that before, but like if you are not showing up for your team consistently, like if they're like, well, I don't know who I'm going to get today, they're having a bad day and they bring it to work, or alternatively, they only care about my wellbeing when the surveys are going out. So that relentless consistency in terms of how you show up for your team, combined with that kind of collective leadership, is actually a really powerful combination, because you're there for the individual. You got a lot of commitment to them and their well-being and what's happening in the world. And then in terms of your achievement orientation and delivering performance, you're using the team to be able to be better together than singularly.
Yeah. So got to remove some of those egos, which is going to be tough. It would be nice to see more of, but they may have no choice going into the future.
And
so
it's hard to do. You're like, hey, I've seen this movie before. It's like, it's not the same movie. And so you got to go, have a view, step back. And I have days when I do that really well. I have days that I don't. My team will say that. And I think the key thing is, if you've got that backbone at the heart of like, do you value everybody? Do people play different roles? Are you really leveraging that? That's what keeps people in your team. That point around, my leader really cares about me. My opinion matters. We might, tough it out a few times. We'll talk straight, but they're always here for me. They always have my back. And there's a lot of trust. That's the biggest thing at the moment. People need to feel like that trust is there in everything they're doing, because security needs are really high. So I think leaders should just really lean into that distributed leadership and think about, how am I showing up in a way? And it's not easy to do, but it's certainly where we need to go.
Nirelle, now to you on the characteristics of good leadership in this modern world, and perhaps might bring in that hybrid term as well. Alicia, I know you don't like the term, but I think
I'm saying we've got to move. I
can't think of another way. I can't.
It's too convenient just to put it in this simple duality model. We've got to move beyond.
Yeah.
So hands down, the best and most progressive leaders are focused on their people. Yes, they're strategic. Yes, they're financially astute, but they understand that the two go hand in hand. They're really curious about their people. They're curious about what's best for their people, and they never stop learning, and they never stop asking what's going to be best for my people. And an example, a lot of the policy changes internally that we've already implemented, and some of our cultural components that we've shifted, have come from what we've seen from other organisations, shamelessly. And Alicia, I'll commend you for your domestic violence policy that was launched on LinkedIn last night. I saw that and I thought, great, that is going to our leadership team. That is so meaningful. So that's an example of curiosity and that continual learning about people. Leaders who are strategic, and that's great, and they get the business done, but the people aren't coming along for the journey, doesn't work. Equally, if you're mates with your people and it's kind of all about the people, that doesn't work either. So it's absolutely got to be a balance. But to talk about the future of work post-pandemic, we've taken a really simple approach, and we consulted our team on how to do this. And it's really simple. We're treating people like adults, and it's a principles-based approach. So people have their home, they have the field where there may be customers, and they have the office. They may have off-site venues as well from time to time. So the environment does vary, and I agree, it's not just two locations. And so the principles are, think about what's right for you. Yes, that's very important, but that's not the only lens. Think about what's important for your customers, your internal and external stakeholders, your team, and work with your leader on the times when you need to be innovating, collaborating, and it's going to make sense around a big whiteboard in the office or in a big workshop. Think about the times when you need to be with customers in the field. Think about the times when you are doing some solo work and you don't want distractions in the office. And so for us, it's not even about the number of days per week. We've taken that out. It's about, and this is part of flexibility, is people might come in for a workshop. We might run a workshop 10 to 2 so that people are avoiding, the Sydney traffic and can get home at a reasonable time, etc. Or the morning, they might come in for even parts of the day. So it's not even about I'm coming in 2 days a week. It's principles based and really treating people like adults. And that's resonated really well with our teams, both when we launched the company. So we launched those principles just before the lockdown, and as we're just coming out at the other end now.
Excellent. That's excellent. Thank you. So, Alicia, I didn't see your LinkedIn post, but I've just pulled it up now. So I think that's, and you note that it's being inspired by Jess Hill, and it looks like she was there to help you launch that policy yesterday. And you can see it's already inspired others, which is great. A good reason
awesome.
sharing these things as well. Like, you're making an impact across other organisations.
It does. So that felt bloody good yesterday, I have to say.
Did you want to talk us through some of the key fundamentals of that policy?
That is a good example of shared leadership, right? Because Sarah Abbott, a big plug for her, and Margarita Maney, many who've gone before her. We've just had some really fantastic leaders in this space. And Sarah said to me, oh, look, we've got Jess Hill coming. And I was like, right, I've got to read her book. And then I was super inspired. And then we met her, and it was sort of, we don't really need a briefing. I was like, no, I need to see her. And then the whole conversation was, how could we do better? Like, I don't think we're doing enough. And in 2 weeks we pivoted, and it was just like, just a perfect, you've got great SMEs, you've got an external agitator, you've got my ability to kind of just talk with our leadership team and say, and everyone got behind it. And I think that's what it takes. It takes really good change management, a lot of courage, but also like, just get on with it. Like, don't try and sugarcoat it. Just say, we are not doing this well enough. Here's the new learnings that I have. What are you going to do to get behind it? The other key tip I would have is, when we always think about change, we make it too precise. We sort of say, 15 people will access that, or 30, and this is what it'll cost. It'll cost what it'll cost. You don't know that. And if you put all those impediments up to commercial people, you're just putting all this stuff in front of them before they can even say yes. So sell the vision, sell the why. Don't get caught in every minutiae detail. Otherwise, you'll never get over the line. And really, really super advocate of that. And Jess is just amazing, and, great to get external agitators to help you with your change would be another tip.
Yeah, excellent. And great point there about that idea that advice on how other people can aim to tweak something in their organisation or introduce something completely new in terms of a policy. So one thing I really like.
Just start.
The one thing that stands out there is the upskilling piece that you've included, because I think we see organisations offering the paid DV leave, which is excellent. But if the skills aren't in place in the organisation on how to respond to somebody when they come and talk about needing that, then it just seems like nobody will actually go and ask for it. And I actually found this with a CEO I recently interviewed who runs a business of around 1,000 people, and noted, well, nobody's ever actually taken it. And it's like, well, it seems hard to believe that nobody would need it in an organisation that size, but it sounded like maybe they didn't have that extra layer that was needed.
You're right. It is the change management. It is, okay, so we need to have our IT team having more phones. It is, how do I put those team members who are going to be really trusted in all our sites? How do I do a champions network around this? Like, you can't just, and that's that whole thread the whole way through the organisation. Get the commitment, get the tools, get the skills. We see that in inclusion and diversity. A lot of people saying, I don't know how to have that conversation. Like, okay, well, what if we taught you? So skills is really the simplest thing you can do. We talk about being one person to make change. If you taught yourself those skills and you taught those skills to another person and they teach them to another person, that's when you get groundswell. And that's when culture change happens, when the collective rises up and says, hang on a minute, I think we need to do this more broadly. So skills is a really great change pathway.
Nirelle, just to finish on a final comment from you, I wondered if you might have anything to add on that, in the sense of, has there been anything, or a particular skill or some other strategy that you have found has been particularly helpful for getting across the change that you want to see in an organisation?
Yeah, again, we're into month 6 of a new organisation, and we very early on again thought about the capabilities that we need. How will we develop talent? We're a smaller organisation than the mothership that we came from, which has its advantages. And something that we've really quickly implemented is hybrid roles, which sounds basic, when you sort of think about it just with the descriptor. But we've done it quite broadly, where instead of somebody moving from a discrete role to another discrete role, we've pared back role number 1 and given them experience in another area, but actually put it into their JD, if you like. It's not just a project over here or sort of, help out over here. It's tangible. And the reason we've done that is to build capabilities very quickly, so that we're future fit and people don't have to spend 3 years in one role, 3 years in another, 3 years in another to get to senior roles. We're thinking about it differently by what are the experiences that they need, and that is resulting in a lot of hybrid roles, but they're truly hybrid, and people really like it. Not all of them are perfect. Some of them we've had to sort of tweak to get them right. But that's that growth and development, but accelerated so that we can build capabilities and people can experience growth quickly, and we've got future fit individuals for roles down the track.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you both so much for joining us and providing this employer context behind this conversation. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Nirelle.
Thank you, Angela.